What's going on, guys? Back at it again with another video here for you guys on the channel. This one in particular, I'm going to be going through the skills for Azandar to include the racial passive called Sons of Kozinset. With that being said, I'm not the greatest reader on the planet, so if I misread or I can't pronounce one of the things that is written in his skill set or whatever, forgive me for that. His are a little bit complicated to read at some points, so that is what it is. But we're gonna be going through all three of his skill lines to include the Quill Knight, Revitalizing Researcher, and the Scholar of Apocrypha. So if you're excited for this video, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, let's just jump right into this. Alright guys, so like I said, Azandar is a companion that you can get here in the game, of course, and like all the rest of the companions, he actually does have his own companion passive or red guard skills or whatever you want to call it, racial passive. His in particular is called the Son of Kozinset, and it's actually a pretty good one. As you guys can see right here, it says increases health by 3% and increases ability cooldown by 3%. So the ability cooldown by 3% is a pretty invaluable one, mostly because he can use his skills that much faster than the next companion, right? If he can use his abilities faster, the DPS can be faster, the taunts can be faster, literally the healing can be faster. Absolutely anything that you want to do would be increased by that much faster just because he's got this in his racial passive. But not only that, he also has the increased health by 3%, which can help his durability or his tankiness, so to speak, which kind of lends itself very well towards tanking. Both of these arguably lends itself very, very well for tanking. As you guys will actually see, it actually synchronizes very well to some of his skills in his class skill lines. So let's jump right into the Quill Knight. Quill Knight has a fantastic skill, which is the first one that we're going to be talking about right now. It's called Scathing Rune, and has a cast time of 0.5 seconds at an enemy for 22 meters range. Duration 15 seconds, but the cooldown is at 11.6 seconds, so that's something that you gotta weigh in well, of course. But the tooltip reads as this: Azandar uses a runic technique to taunt their enemy to attack them for 15 seconds, applying minor maim to them for 15 seconds, reducing their damage done by 5%. Used when the enemy is not already taunted. So long story short, this is probably a better taunt than your actual weapon like sword and board. I'll actually go over there real quick. So provoke, obviously it does physical damage, taunting the enemy for 15 seconds. Good and all, but it doesn't do a ton, just a little bit of damage. This one has a little bit more to it because it also has some usability to it, but not just the taunt itself and a little bit of damage. This also does minor maim for 15 seconds, which reduces reducing their damage done by 5%. So even though that he's using this skill, it will also do some damage reduction by 5%, which is absolutely fantastic for the survivability and the durability of anybody caught within the enemy's, AoEs or whatever, so overall this is a great one, and arguably you could probably use this to replace your sword and board taunt, or even your destruction staff one, which for the Frost Blast literally just does a little bit of damage plus taunting for 15 seconds. So this one's not even, it's less special than the sword and board one. So this is a good one if you want to use it to replace one of your other taunts, which is fine, of course, but again, I'll leave that to be for you. But the next one, I can't even read this, but it's Abor's Augmented Ward. I don't know if I said that right, but whatever. Cast time 0.8 seconds. Target is at self. Duration 6 seconds. Cooldown 15.5 seconds. The 0.5, by the way, is because of his racial passive, kind of reducing the cooldown of everything else, which is great. Azandar draws on advanced research to gain a damage shield that absorbs up to 25% of their max health for 6 seconds. The first time they take damage after casting the shield, retaliates and deals 6,000 magic damage to an attacker. This is absolutely great for a tank. great in general, just period, for a tank. And the reason why I say that is because not only does his racial passive also increase his max health, so the damage shield that it gets is actually going to be just that much stronger, but the cooldown is going to help too because of its racial passive that also reduces the cooldown down to 15.5 seconds. So both of those synergizes perfectly for this skill. But on top of that, to just put icing on the cake, it also reflects 6,000 damage back to the attacker after he is hit the first time after generating that damage shield. This is a fantastic skill all the way around, and it lends wonders to Azandar as a tank. This would probably be up there as one of the better tanks because of the synergy between all of the skills, between his actual skill line and his actual racial passive. This is a very well thought out character in my opinion. Last but not least in this skill line is Fear of the Unknown. This is a crowd control, as you guys will read in a little bit. Cast time 0.4 seconds at an enemy, 15 meters of range. Duration 4 seconds, cooldown 7.8 seconds. Azandar confronts an enemy with unknowable truth of reality, applying fear to them for 4 seconds. So it doesn't do anything like spectacular, but it does apply fear. I know Zareth Var also has a fearing mechanism to his skill lines, which is absolutely great. And if you guys have ever seen any of those kinds of fears, it ends up being great for crowd control type of situations. Of course, this one is going to be using for 4 seconds, so overall very, very much usable, especially with the cooldown being as low as 7.8 seconds, which can be further be reduced with the quicken trait or the Telvanni efficiency set. Revitalizing Researcher is essentially your healing line. Tripitic, whatever, I can't read that. Psychic, cast time 0.6 seconds at an area, radius 28 meters, cooldown 7.8 seconds. Azandar launches a trio of restorative runes at themselves or an ally, healing for 2,000 health 3 times. So essentially this is a 6,000 health in a 3-tick iteration, so to speak, used when either you or Azandar is below 75% health. But with that being said, of course, it ends up being a pretty sizable heal for what it is, especially because it is a low cooldown at 7.8 seconds, doing 6,000 health healing essentially. It just ends up being a great heal in general. This, I would argue, more so of being like a heal over time, even though it's not technically a heal over time. It does do 2,000 in a 3-tick section, so to speak. So it ends up, I guess, indirectly being a heal over time, but still great heal nonetheless. And I would argue this is kind of like Cinder or whatever it's called for the Dragonite side for Bastion and Tanloran. Either way, great skill. Next one is Shields of Erudition. Probably said that wrong. Cast time 0.5 seconds, area, radius of 28 meters, duration 6 seconds, cooldown 11.6 seconds. Azandar manifests spinning discs of pure knowledge to surround themselves and up to 2 allies, granting a damage shield that absorbs 6,000 damage for 6 seconds. As you guys can probably see, Azandar loves his damage shields, and that is for good reason. They come in handy, especially for the survivability of your companion and for you as well. But this one, of course, is for either or. Well, it's actually for both, but the discs allow you to take damage for 6,000 damage, which is pretty decent considering it's a companion's damage shield. I know some of your personal damage shields can do significantly higher than that, but an extra 6,000 damage shield is just that much more survivability for not just you, but for him as well. So this is a pretty decent one in my opinion. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's got an average cooldown, a little bit less than average because of his companion passive, of course, but overall pretty solid. Zones of Recuperation, cast time 0.5 seconds at an area, radius 8 meters, duration 8 seconds, cooldown 15.5 seconds. Azandar outlines a domain of eldritch power, healing them and their allies standing within for 1000 health over 8 seconds and granting 150 health, magic, and stamina recovery. So this is kind of like circumstantial in my opinion. It doesn't do a ton of healing at only 1000 over 8 seconds, so really nothing if you're asking me. But where this gets its bang for its buck is granting health, magic, and stamina recovery at 150 for that period of 8 seconds. Now, this is something that you will have to weigh in if it's something that you're having trouble dealing with on your own personal tune. If you're having like sustain issues or something like that, this will be a great skill to add for Azandar to help you sustain your health, magic, and stamina recovery. But realistically, if you do a good build on your end, this one would just kind of be superfluous and wouldn't be necessary in a lot of aspects. So again, this is more so on how you personally play the game. If you're having trouble with sustainment, this would be a good skill for you, but for the majority of players, I would argue this is probably a pass for most people. But again, I'll leave that to you to decide. The last skill line is also where your ultimate is. It's called Scholar of Apocrypha. I'm going to read the active abilities first and finish up with the ultimate ability. The first ability in question is going to be the Triune Word. Cast time 0.4 second. At the target, of course, is the enemy. Range 22 meters. Cooldown 7.8 seconds. Really short cooldown, guys. Azandar crafts a trio of runes before launching them at an enemy, dealing 2000 magic damage 3 times. So this does over those 3 ticks, similar to the other skill that we had in the healing section, the shields of whatever. Oh, wait. Okay, whatever. Anyways, it does 3 different ticks of 2000 magic damage to the enemy. So because of that, it ends up being 6000 magic damage, but it's not one attack. Excuse me, it's not one initial hit of 6000. It's 3 separate ticks of 2000. Ends up being pretty good. The fact that it's a short cooldown too, you can have this up all the time if you really need to, of course, especially with your mitigation, with your quicken trait, and of course if you're wearing Telvanni efficiency. But that ends up being ridiculous if you can keep this up like non-stop. I mean, it's a pretty good damaging ability in my opinion, and that damage will only go up if you're using stuff like the aggressive trait, or even if you're using some shattering to penetrate some of the enemy's armor and stuff like that. There's a lot of factors you can weigh in on here, so you could actually get this damage even more substantially higher. So something to take into consideration, but this at its base function is still pretty good to say the least. Next up is Tendrils of the Cordless Sea. Cast time 0.4 seconds. Area target range 15 meters. Area 15 by 5 meters. Cooldown 11.6 seconds. Azandar uses their arm. Infuses their arm with Abyssal Arcanum and thrusts forward, dealing 3000 physical damage to enemies and applying minor vulnerability to them for 6 seconds, increasing the damage taken by 5%. So long story short, this does a decent, probably less than decent, but decent, I'll call it, amount of damage at 3000 physical damage to enemies. But where this ability really shines is the fact that it also applies minor vulnerability, which you'll see synergizes very well with another one, with another skill which we will get to shortly, but applies minor vulnerability to them for 6 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 5 seconds. So if you have this ability equipped on him, he uses it, and for the next 6 seconds you just go ham on the enemy that he used it on, you're gonna be dealing 5% more damage right off the rip just because of this ability alone, which is fantastic. The next ability, just remember that, by the way, the minor vulnerability on this, because we're going to be kind of going full circle on that in a second. Last but not least in the regular skills is going to be Fate Omen's Inspiration, 0.3 seconds at an area target. Radius of 28 meters, duration for 8 seconds, cooldown 15.5 seconds. Azandar charges their weapons and their allies' weapons with apocryphal energy for 8 seconds, applying minor berserk, increasing their damage done by 5%. So this Bastion and Tenlorin have a similar skill to this. I'm not going to really get into that too much, but I think this is a little bit better, only because you get minor berserk if you don't already have minor berserk for your character. What that does essentially is just increases their damage done by 5%. So if he activates this skill, you're going to be dishing out a little bit more damage. So out of the fact that you're making them more vulnerable by 5%, and then now you're dishing out 5% more damage as well, that's right off the rip. Just by these two skills alone, you're going to be dealing 10% more damage just by that very nature alone. But that's not it. When you look at the ultimate ability, Vigorous Tentacular Eruption, cast time 2 seconds at an enemy, range 28 meters, radius 8 meters, and the cost of 200. Ultimate, Azandar creates a gate to Apocrypha beneath an enemy. After 2 seconds, a swarm of hideous tentacles burst through the gate, dealing 9,000 magic damage to enemies within the gate, knocking them up in the air and stunning them for 3 seconds. Enemies damaged by the tentacles receive major vulnerability for 4 seconds, increasing their damage done by 10%. So just by this attack that makes them 5% more vulnerable, this skill that allows you to deal 5% more damage, that's together and collaboratively about 10% more added damage. But you also have major vulnerability from this, that's 20% more damage. So if all three of those are active at the exact same time, you will be dishing out 20% more damage effectively due to those three skills. Of course, to have them line up perfectly is going to be impossible, but if they're at least constantly rolling, you're going to be consistently dishing out more damage in general. But that's not the only thing about this skill. That's probably the best thing about this skill, but it also does 9,000 magic damage. On top of the fact that it actually knocks them in the air and stuns them for 3 seconds, it ends up being a great utility skill as well. So this ultimate really does a lot of things, and because of all of it that it doesn't do one thing fantastic, but everything put together makes this ultimate fantastic. But that's that. There you guys go. That's gonna do it for this video, guys. As you guys saw, Azandar is a fantastic companion. He's got a lot of skills that really synergize together very, very well. Arguably, probably making him better as a tank than anything else. Maybe even better as a DPS, maybe even better as a healer. But I think he'd be okay as a DPS, and the tank is probably just his #1 bread and butter. But that's just my personal opinion, guys. If you guys got any value whatsoever from this video, do me a huge favor, drop a like on this video. Also, subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed, because it really does help this channel grow. So with that being said, catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.